The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the podcast. Additionally, opinions of the host and guests are just that, opinions. Any political commentary or discussions of public figures are shared as personal opinions for conversational and entertainment purposes only. This content is not intended as professional, medical, legal, or financial advice. And with that, enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Pivot Stories with Leona Hatcher. I am your host, Leona Hatcher. This is a podcast where we explore the moments that disrupt our lives, challenge our identities, and ultimately invite us into something that is deeper, freer, and more aligned. Today, I am so honored and excited to be joined by my guest, Ranieka Weston. Ranieka, welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me go ahead and give you your flowers, girl, before we start. So you know what this lady is all about. Ranieka is a keynote speaker, an executive coach, a thought leader whose work centers disrupting narratives, inspiring change, and unlocking organizational change and human growth. Ranieka, welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are when you're not leading with your resume.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, it's Ranieka Weston. I always say to people who are old enough to remember the vacuum Eureka, it is like Eureka with an R.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have Southern roots. So I was born in the South and I really resonate and connect with the South. I also say that I have branches that extend out to the Midwest because
Mm-hmm.
much of my life was spent in the Midwest. And now I'm on the East Coast. So
Yeah.
it's sort of like this tree that has branched over. I am a mother of two. I have two adult sons. So it's nice to see them attempt to adult in the world. They're not quite there yet, but
Mm-hmm.
they are adulting. I also say to folks, it's really, maybe TMI, but also that I am a divorced mom of two.
Mm-hmm.
So for many years, it was about me raising those two boys. Worked in corporate America for the majority of my career. So I am also a Florida A&M grad, proud FAMU Rattler, also a proud Pirate. I went to Seton Hall
Mm-hmm.
and also Georgetown to complete my executive coach training. So been all around with
Mm-hmm.
education, raising children, all of those things. Spent most of my career in the biotech and pharma space. And I don't recommend this to people, but I think it had been something that was building. I did not know what corporate trauma was. Now it's a
Mm-hmm.
thing. People talk about it, but there was a time when things were not a thing. And when I found out what it was, it's the first time I'd actually gone to therapy.
Yeah.
And I'd used EAP. I'm always telling people, use your benefits at your
Use your
company. And
best.
I talked to
Yes.
this woman and I was like, that's what I have. She gave it a name. We talked about it. And in that moment, I've never called this woman back to tell her this, but she was probably the spark, the genesis that caused me to really understand that I was no longer going to trade my dignity for belonging.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
decided that I was going to leave. And I had written on my
Mm-hmm.
calendar, we ready, we looking, we out. And then time
Mm-hmm.
passed. And I was like, let's go back to work.
Yeah.
And as luck would have it, as the heavens would have it, I walked in a conversation on a Friday afternoon and said to the person that I was reporting to that it just was not a good fit anymore.
Wow.
And she was gracious enough, and she
Yeah.
knew it. I
Yeah.
told her my expiration date had come. I didn't think it was fair for me to have a job while looking for a job.
Yeah.
And she said, "What does that mean?" I said, "I don't know." So the beautiful thing, it was a Friday. I got a weekend to think about it. And that Monday, I came in and we talked about what that looked like.
Yeah.
And I've been on this journey since that time, coaching, facilitating, and doing some keynote
Speaking.
addresses. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And one of the things I really like about you since I met you is that you're so honest and generous with your story and with your like you lead with like your truth. And I love that about you. And a little story time about how we met and how we connected. So we were in a training. It was a DEI training. It was with the organization called the IDI, the Intercultural Development Inventory. And we were having conversations and like breakout sessions. And then for some reason, like you were saying something and I was having the same thought. And I don't know who was speaking, but I looked over and it was like, oh, she gets it. I don't know what it was, but I was just like, she gets it. I was like, I hope we're in a breakout room together. And then sure enough, the very next time we had a breakout session, like we were in a breakout session together, I was like, I wanted to talk to you. so bad. And you were like, I did too. And so ever since then, I think we stayed in contact off and on. And one of the things that I really appreciated was I was just starting my entrepreneurship journey. And I believe you were too. And I was really looking for community and I wasn't getting community. I wasn't really, I tried, I reached out, I joined organizations in South Florida, but it was very difficult to find like-minded people. And I think we had two or three sessions like where we just like encouraged each other. Um, and like, you really poured into me and really like validated, okay, I think what you're doing is great. And that really helped me along the way. It was a very, very difficult season for me, and I don't think you understood what you did for me during that time.
Thank you.
So
Thank
I
you.
just want to let you know that that meant the world to me that you were willing to even do that. So
Mhm.
thank you
Yeah.
for that.
No, no.
And and that's just who you are. That's just who you are. Which is why I really wanted you on the podcast because I really want women who I've learned a lot from, who I can still learn a lot from, and I want that same energy for my listeners or my viewers. Like that whole crab in a barrel, there's only enough for a couple of us or one of us mentality. I loathe it. And if I sense that, I will not even air, the episode, whether it's on the podcast or outside of it, because I want, we're going through a lot right now as Black women, and I want folks on here who get it. So, thank you for
Yeah.
being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I have to apologize. I tried to turn all my chimes off, so I'm going to look just to the left right here.
Okay.
Because all the chimes should be off. At
All
this
right, no
age,
worries.
I'm
We're
really
not
sensitive
live.
to
I could just
time.
edit it out, so it's
Okay. All right. I just want to make
fine.
sure. I make sure all the chimes are off. All right. I'm ready. You got my undivided attention.
Okay, alrighty. So, every pivot story guest has a moment or season that shifted the trajectory of their life. And
Mhm.
you talked about that a little bit.
Oh,
But what was the defining pivot moment for you?
I've had so many. Regarding career, regarding relationship, regarding
Career.
career.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that was a huge one.
Yeah.
I've had probably this is one that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I have mainly been in male dominated careers.
Mm-hmm.
Sales does not typically feel like there's all types of people in sales, but I started in biotech and pharma when individuals were called detail men. And they literally would
Oh,
take the package insert, which was the detail, and they would
okay.
go in and talk to physicians. So hence the name detail man.
Okay.
And when I came into the organization, I think they were kind of doing an experiment,
Mm-hmm.
specifically with the college that I graduated from, the University, Florida A&M University.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, wow, okay, this is different. I played sports, I have cousins, I have a brother, I get it, but this is a little different. And the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I noticed was the difference in the surface of conversation, and that
Mm.
men would only go to a basic surface level. And this was during the time that the internet was not prevalent. So when they would come in and talk about sports, what that meant was I actually had a newspaper subscription because I wanted to know what was going on in the sports arena. So
Yeah.
when we would come together, I could have those conversations. I'm going to get to the pivotal moment.
Yeah.
So I'm
Take your
working on
time.
my career, and I'm
Mhm.
working mainly in a male dominated place.
Yeah.
And I traveled, I had moved companies a couple of times, and I was traveling with the person that I reported to, and that person reported to the CEO. So pretty senior person. And we get off the plane, and he goes straight for the cab. And I'm like,
Mhm.
wait, I got to get my bag. And
Yeah.
he's like, and I mean, it just his whole demeanor changed. And he
Mm.
looked at me and he said, what? He said, when you travel with me, note to self, you will never check a bag. And I said, yes, sir. And I
Oh.
walked over, and I mean, it was the longest, it takes forever for the belt to move, but it
Yeah,
felt like it
yeah.
was an hour waiting on my
Yeah,
luggage.
yeah.
Grab my luggage, walk with him to the cab. And I thought to myself, note to self, keep everything in one bag. Keep your
Mm-hmm.
personal life, keep your professional life, keep everything you need in one bag so you can pick it up and leave at any time. And I
Mm.
would say that was a really pivotal moment for me, because
Yeah.
I got instruction that was very clear, and
Yeah.
it was one that I could take a bag. I mean, who was he to tell me not to check a bag at the time? You didn't even pay for check bags back then.
Yeah.
But it was a clear lesson in how he operated, and it was a clear lesson for me moving forward of how I wanted to operate.
Yeah. So when you look at when it became time for you to pivot, you were ready.
Oh yeah, and that
Yeah.
was and I don't think he meant it that way,
Yeah.
but it was always for me. Whenever you're ready to pivot, you got enough. in your bag that you can pick it up and you can go at any point.
Yeah, that's a life lesson for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool, cool. And so you speak so powerfully about helping leaders find their voice,
Mhm.
right? It's so important, especially right now. Was there a time when you struggled with that?
Um, I would say I struggled with it for a long time. I mean, I
Mm,
think it's been in recent years that I have really found my voice. It's interesting. We'll talk specifically about the voice. I've always had sort of a deep tone,
hmm
and and I'm tall, right? So I
hmm
got this deep tone. I have this height, and so through life, I've tried to maneuver through that. I don't want to be too big, and then people are intimidated. But then again, remember I told you I worked in this male dominated
hmm
place, and so this height and the voice was really good because I could
Yeah,
step in with them
yeah,
and work with the best of them. But I would say that my voice was probably really dim when I first started in sales.
yeah,
For whatever reason, I I just didn't get it. I didn't, most of the people, my parents are fairly young, it's 20 years between my mom and I. So most of the individuals that I interacted with were my parents' age.
yeah.
And I grew up in an environment where children were seen and not heard. And
hmm
so I still think I carried a little bit of that around with me. And I don't think it was until I actually left sales, which you would think you had a voice in sales. It was not until I left sales and I moved in an environment in an organization where I was N of one and I had no one around me. And it was literally, I had to sink or swim. And that's when I knew that I had packed my suitcase enough that I had all the things that I needed that I could survive and I could not just survive, but thrive. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. It's so funny because I'm 5'3"
Mm.
and I've always struggled with trying to make my voice more I wanted to make my voice more prominent. You know what I mean? And I used to have a boss, and I used to work when I was in graduate school at one point, and I used to work with children, and she always said my maiden name is Alexander. Miss Alexander, put some bass in your voice with these kids, and I was like, all right. She's like, your voice is too soft. So it's something that I always struggled with. But my mom always encouraged us to speak our mind, even
Mhm.
when it was like, okay, I can't believe that that kid just said that. But she never squashed it. You know, that whole be seen and not heard thing. And my mom is a boomer. I'm sure at some point she grew up with someone telling her that, but
Mhm.
she rebelled. And she will tell me stories about like, you know, corporal punishment is alive and well when she was growing up because she's first of all, she's from Grenada, so her mom is Trinidadian. And my mom is also from Trinidad, but she grew up in Grenada and you know, back home like you will beat kids in school.
Mhm.
But she was so against it. And she spoke up when her mom would, you know, hey, go get a switch off the tree. She's like, no, I'm not. Like, and I was like, her daughter is just like that, you know? So she's like, you know, I couldn't blame you for being that way because that's how I was, you know? And I just kind of have to like guide you through that, like little sassy.
But in so many ways, it's funny you say that
Yeah.
because I think I don't know if I envied that in other
Yeah.
people when I was a child. I think I saw it, and I
hmm
never, I've always been one of those, and I'm still blessed is the peacemaker. So I don't want any
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because usually I have an end goal in mind. And once I say that's the thing I want, I'm going to
Yeah.
figure out how to get it. And so I don't
Yeah.
want any problems. Let me just figure out how to get the thing that I want. But I
Yeah.
do wish
Mhm.
earlier on I had built those reps,
Yeah.
to be more like that.
But it's a balance. I love that you know, our community is so unique and dynamic. But you know what they said, it's always the little ones.
Mhm.
It's always with the
So
big
true.
mouth.
So
Oh gosh, and I could attest to that. Okay.
true.
So moving on. Let's see. So with more than 2 decades of experience, we spoke and I also like, you know, did a little research before we started. So you've had almost 2 decades of experience across sales, corporate training, and talent development. How
Mhm.
did your career evolution influence your confidence, clarity, and your sense of purpose?
I think, when I think early on, what I wanted to do more than anything was I wanted to be a hospital rep. I was
Mm,
a sales rep in
interesting.
North Florida, South Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there was a product on the market for depression. And my
Mm,
mother would always say to me, make sure you lock those drugs up because somebody, and I'm thinking, my friends don't want that. And I remember thinking, I gotta get rid of these samples because at the time we had samples. I'm so tired of these samples.
Yeah.
Friday night, sometimes my friends would be out and I'm at home counting samples because I couldn't, I'm not that great operationally.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I thought, gosh, if I'm a hospital rep, I don't think I have to have samples. And then, that if I did that, I would have just sort of died and gone to heaven. And I remember I was riding with my manager at the time. This person saw something in me that I did not see in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, I think you could be a manager. I was like, manager. And I had no problems with that. Some people don't want to lead because they don't want a team. But I could not dream that big. The biggest I
Mm-hmm.
could see was me being a hospital rep.
Mm.
And so for me, that was the first time that I think that someone was pouring into me or saw something in me that I couldn't even see for myself. And I didn't deny it. I didn't knock it down. What I did was I interviewed, but a lot of
Mm.
times I have a problem. If you say let's, I say go without
Mm-hmm.
a lot of research,
Mm-hmm.
especially if I trust you. So I
Yeah.
trusted what he said.
I'm that
I
way too.
interviewed for a job in a place that I had never been to before. I
Mm-hmm.
actually got the job, and he said to me, "You can't not take it." And I was like, "I've never been there. I don't even know what the city's like." And he's like, "You got to take it."
Yeah.
And I did. I had never been to the place before, and so again, I think it to me that was just I believe in sort of this tap. Some
Yeah.
people say God, some people say the universe aligns. I
Yeah.
think all those things, and I do believe
Yeah.
that he was the person to see in me and pour in me that then allowed me to do something different.
Awesome. And I think that makes sense because of what you pour into other people, like, especially when they don't see it. It's because others took a chance on you. And that's what you do for others. So I think that's awesome. You answered the question.
Mhm.
Alrighty. So you describe your work as disrupting narratives, and you do a lot of work with leaders via your leadership programs. I love that disrupting narrative, quote unquote. What narratives do you most often see holding professionals back?
Oh gosh. It sort of depends on your upbringing because the narratives that you hear, and it's funny, I'm trying to read the title of the book behind you. It's the
Which one?
Queen, the what is it? The Queen, the little girl.
Oh, The Adventures of Bella and Bee. That's my
Okay.
book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Bella and B, I mean Bella, because the little girl's Bella, she's got narratives. And as she grows to be an adult, there
Yeah.
will be stories that she tells herself. So what's interesting is when I do a 360 with individuals, the first thing I do is I tell them to tell me about the 3 chapters of your life. That's not
Yeah.
something I made up, it's something that I learned in a training.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is most people in those narratives, there is something or someone that had a great impact on their life.
Yeah.
And what I see most often is that that person is the person that still is behind them, pushing them like this, or there is a person in their life that is standing in front of them saying, and
Mm.
they still literally can see that person even as an adult. So I
Wow.
think the narratives that I see most often are people who read the little book, The Little Engine That Could, I think I can, or they actually saw the movie, the scary movie that continues to play in their head over and over to say that they can't do a thing.
Wow. Yeah. That is so true. It starts with childhood. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really why I wrote that book, to remind myself. Every story in that book is a lesson that I learned from my grandmother, a mentor, my mom, my aunt, Hillary. Like there are lessons in the book, just all the women in my life that really I don't know, like they pushed me to be my better self and they believed in me and they saw things in me that I didn't even know was there. So you're absolutely right. And I wanted to honor that because sometimes that scary movie can become louder than, what was poured into you, right?
Mm-hmm.
The good things that were poured into you. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely. I get it. Many high-performing individuals still struggle with their own power. Imposter syndrome. I went to church last Sunday and Pastor talked about imposter syndrome quite a bit. Why do you think capable voices still struggle to fully show up um, as themselves?
Like a combination of things. I think
Yeah.
one of it is, when I was a kid, the television used to go off at night.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to use your imagination, right?
Oh,
Either you
yeah.
went to bed, one of the two.
You mean the cut off automatically
They
because
cut
there's no
off. They
program?
they
Yeah.
played it. They played it. The flag would come on,
Yeah,
and
the
then it
Star
would just
Spangled
literally
Banner.
go,
Yeah.
they would go off, right? And I'll tell you this quick story, and then I'll tell you why I think some people struggle with that. When my sons were young, they went to Montessori school. And at the
Hmm.
Montessori school, they did not want the kids to watch, to do any sort of thing with the videos. No
Yeah.
video games, no television. It's not what it is now, but they didn't want that. And I remember thinking, that doesn't make sense.
Mm.
And I went to school one day with my younger son, and it was an observation day. And there was one little kid that was running around, running around, running around. And I was like, he's a problem. He's a nuisance. And he needs to be out of the room. Like I didn't say that, but my judgy self said that.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
asked the teacher, I said, what's going on with him? And she said, it's the electronics. He's watching TV at home. And I know he is. I'm thinking to myself, TV at home. And she says, because he's looking for stimulation. He can't sit with the book and imagine and think and be patient enough to see what's next. So he's jumping around looking for stimulation. And we
Yeah.
don't have that type of stimulation here.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, really? And so I think what happens a lot of times with individuals is that we don't have the patience, the insight, the ability to think and dream of what's next. If we can't see it right now in the moment, it's like we're on to the next thing. We are distracted by things that are going on this way versus being distracted by the thing that's ahead of us that we need to do. It could be a conversation, it could be the promotion that we're looking for. And so we've got to do whatever, have the conversations with our leaders, do these other things to get to that space. It's easier to go and be distracted by all the things around us versus having a clear vision, a clear goal of what it is we want next.
That,
So I
yeah.
think that's one of the reasons why it's easier just to say, I don't know if I could do that. I don't think I could do that. And then be on to the next thing that goes sideways.
That makes a lot of sense. So like essentially they give up before they even start because
Yeah.
the setback sometimes could be daunting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think I struggle with too. Just in all transparency, like of course, I had my background in Grenada, and my book pays homage to that. The little girl in the book is barefoot and just running around and in nature and learning things from nature. That's my foundation. But I had a computer in my home since I was like in middle school. And I can't imagine my brothers, they've always had computers. Like there's never been a time where they didn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And video games and etc. because that's what kids were doing, right? And that was the reward. So you get good grades and then they get a new video game, or they go to, at the time it was Blockbuster, and they rent one,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so that instant gratification is something I think that our generation, I'm a millennial, older millennial, but I'm still a millennial, and I that's what we know. Like it's the instant gratification of getting what you want immediately, that serotonin boost
Mm-hmm.
that comes from, the computer games or what have you. When we were in elementary school, we will play those games. Like you remember Go Fish? No, it's not Go Fish. It's Oregon Trail and okay, so when we learned how to use computers in elementary school by playing computer games.
Right. And so think about this.
Yeah,
Think about the fact that most people who have imposter syndrome, it's not that they're not successful.
yeah, yeah.
We're not talking about people who are on the end of like they're not doing things. Many of these folks are highly successful,
Yes.
but they're not achieving the goals and the things that really would take them to the next level. And it's
Okay.
because it's easier to do the things around here and get these quick hits and these quick wins.
Yeah.
Most people cannot sit with their thoughts. Most people can't meditate.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that. I have to have a moving meditation. But
Yeah.
if you can sit with your thoughts, because my brother does this thing called, I think it's called Seven Hats.
Mm.
He teaches this. And maybe it's five hats, I can't remember it. But he asked the question, where do you do your best thinking? He'll be in,
Yeah.
programs and corporations and ask people that. And most people say in the shower.
Mm.
And you
Oh, makes
do a
sense.
lot of good thinking in the shower. Most people don't have music in the shower.
Yeah.
99% of the time you're in there by yourself.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
So if I'm in a space by myself and my thoughts are with me for
Mhm.
that moment in time, I have the most clarity that I have. Some people run. And so
Yeah.
if you run, a lot of times that's where you get your clarity, but it's the
Yeah.
place where you have to go inward because
Yeah.
all the answers are there. There's enough
That's
information out
true.
here. All the answers are there. It's just, you're just trying to figure out how do I make it happen for
You
me.
already have everything that you need. Just have
Mhm.
to tap into it. Yeah, my best thinking is at like 4, 5, 6 in the morning when the world is quiet and it's just me.
Yeah.
And my dog will know. He will leave me alone. My husband's sleeping. My dog will come out. He'll see that mom is thinking or writing. He's like, all right, I'm going back. And he will leave me
Yeah.
alone. And so, because
Mhm.
he gets it. But yeah, it's true. When the world is quiet, that's when I do my best thinking. It makes a lot of sense. I've
Mhm.
never heard that take on imposter syndrome before, but it makes a lot of sense. Alrighty. Let's see. So, what does owning your power actually look like in everyday leadership? I know it's a buzzword, owning your power, standing in your truth, but what does it actually look like? What do you teach them?
Well, I think the first thing, because one of the things I talk about with the negotiator's mindset, so that's what I maybe we can talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things that
Yeah.
I say to people first is that you have to know your value.
Hmm.
And one of the things, if you're going to stand in your power, is what is your power?
Yeah.
Like, I can't stand, I think about superheroes, right?
Hmm.
Superman can't stand in, um, you know, the same thing that Wonder Twin powers can stand in, or the
Yeah.
same thing that Batman can say, because that's not his power. Like, if
Yeah.
he's going to stand in his power, he's going to fly, he's going
Hmm.
to do all the things that Superman does. So, first,
Hmm.
I got to know what my power is.
Yeah.
And is my power the ability to say the thing that no one else is willing to say? Is my power the willingness to be patient when everybody else is running around? Like, what is your superpower? And
Yeah.
then when you know what that is, standing in it literally means never allowing anyone to shrink that power.
Mm.
And when kryptonite comes around, I think we talked about energy, like, move from it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means for some people, if you're in a job, it's like, well, how do I move? Well, it's a whole lot of reasons, a whole lot of ways. First of all, you gotta start living below your means because you ain't stepping out on nothing if you got too many bills to pay.
Yeah.
The second thing is you've got to take the time to maybe look for what else is around you, what else will energize you. Because the job that you have now, I remember one time, I'm going a real quick tangent. I was ready to look for a new job, and my mother had come to visit me. And she said, "Oh, this is a really nice neighborhood." And I was like, proud.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was complaining about my job. And she said, "Well, do these people work at the same company you work at?"
Hmm.
And I was like, Mama, I don't know where they work. I don't really know these people. And she said, "So that means there's other jobs out there that pay the same money that you make."
Hmm. So simple.
And
Uh-huh.
I was like, I guess. You can
She
make
just told you about
the,
yourself. You didn't even know
you can
it.
make excuses. Well, they have generational wealth. Well, and she would have said, "You know how big this neighborhood is? You can tell me all these people." So she
Yeah.
did. It was a simple response. And
Yeah.
so I think to stand in your power means first knowing your power,
Hmm.
and then standing in it means that never allowing anything that feels like kryptonite, and I use
Hmm.
kryptonite because we just talked about Superman, to dim the light, to make you feel small or that you can't use your power, and then find the places where you can use it and do great things with it.
That's awesome. And then it goes back to what you were saying is like quieten your mind long enough to recognize what your power is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So yeah, we're all going to talk about the negotiator's mindset. That's actually the next question, so that's perfect. So
Okay.
your framework, the negotiator's mindset, is such a compelling concept. It promotes self-advocacy and personal responsibility. Can you share a little bit more about that and perhaps give us an example of how that could be applied in the real world? Just a little taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are five things. I actually have I don't know if I sent you one, but I have to make sure you have one. So
Yeah.
in all the work that I was doing around this, and this came out of conversations with individuals, whether they be friends, whether they be clients, because what I found was that most people don't have a confidence issue. So when people start talking about imposter syndrome, and I mean, it's real, don't get me wrong, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to diminish it, but I think more people have a negotiation problem,
Hmm.
either negotiating with others or being able to negotiate with themselves.
Yeah.
And so I have five things that I talk about: knowing your value, stand in your strength, hold your boundaries, shift how you navigate, because how you negotiate at work might be different than how you negotiate at home, and then secure the win. So some people will say, "Well, I tried to negotiate with such and such, but it didn't work." Well, the fact that you open your mouth, that's a win. So you got to figure out where the
Yeah.
wins along the way. Um, Tell me the question again because I got off track.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, well, you're breaking down the negotiator's mindset.
Okay,
And the
okay.
question was basically, can you share a little bit more about that and perhaps give us an example? And
Oh,
maybe
yes.
that's the part of how you can apply that.
So it's almost like I say to people, if you ever get the esteemed honor of having a pink Cadillac because you sold that many Mary Kay products,
Mhm. Yeah,
everywhere you go, you will see pink Cadillacs.
yeah, yeah.
So everywhere I go, I see the ability or inability for people to negotiate. And so I
Yeah.
use this framework everywhere. I was at an organization and they were having challenges with trust. Unfortunately, they have had to remove some things on the calendar, some things that they've acknowledged as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion because of the
Mm-hmm.
climate that we're in. And so some employees are really upset. They're like, you really weren't in it. And so now they have some questions about, do the folks really trust us? Do they trust our
Mm-hmm.
vision? Do they trust who we are? And so I layered that framework on top of trust. And so what
Yeah.
I've decided is that if EQ can be a framework for so many things in life, so can the negotiator's mindset. So can those five,
Mm-hmm.
I call them the foundational five. It's interesting. In that conversation, one of the things that we talked about, which is the first principle, is your value, right? Like know your value. So in order for me to trust someone, I need as an individual to know who I am. I can't expect other people to trust my word if I don't speak to what my value is.
Yeah.
And so, the other thing that we talked about in there is, one of those was celebrate the win or acknowledge the win, because one of the things I said to a group of about 85 people was that we have to celebrate that your organization is actually still investing in you.
Mm-hmm.
Because outside of people pulling away from that acronym of diversity, equity, and inclusion, they also pulled away from development.
Yeah.
So they didn't just pull away from diversity, they pulled away from the development of all of their people. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as you go in and have a conversation with individuals about what they can and cannot do from an HR perspective and how they can support employees, celebrate the things that they are doing.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
again, the conversation is a negotiation, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we can't do this, then what else can we do as an organization?
Yeah.
And in that same organization, someone asked a question, a Q&A, and they said, what about salary negotiations? Can you talk to us about that? And here I'm standing in front of all these people. The people who paid me are standing there. How do I talk about salary negotiations? Like that, it just was sort of like kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
So what I said to the individual was that you can still use the same framework. If you are going in to negotiate your salary, you got to know your worth, know your value.
Mm-hmm.
What is the market reference point? What are the skills do you have to actually be coming and talking about this? Shifting how you navigate. The conversation that I have about about my salary might be different than I'm having with my manager than I have with maybe my grand boss. Because if you're looking to be promoted, if you're looking for those things and you get the opportunity to speak to other people, you do. But the way
Yeah.
you talk to them and what you talk about might be different. So it's a framework that to me can be layered on any sort of leadership challenge or anything
Mm-hmm.
that's going on in the business or personal world of a
You
person.
can use it across the board. And earlier you mentioned EQ, that's in emotional intelligence quotient.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. Thank you.
Just want
Yep,
to
yep.
make sure. Yeah. Alrighty.
Yeah.
And so let's see. And I think we touched on that, right? The framework.
Mm-hmm.
And why do so many people, when talking about like salary negotiations,
Mm-hmm.
and that young woman who asked you that in the group, that's something I struggled with, but I had to, with my therapist, like work my way through that.
Mm-hmm.
But why do so many people, especially women, feel discomfort around advocating for themselves? And you talked about EAP programs before, and that really
Mm-hmm.
helped me with that
Yeah.
component of like advocating for myself when it comes to especially salary negotiations. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think some of it, again, it goes back to those narratives and stories.
Yeah.
So, depending on your upbringing, depending on the region, I mean, when I say upbringing, it could be region, it could be culture, it could be, it's so many things that go into make up who we are and how we show up.
Mm-hmm.
But many of us did not advocate for ourselves because we were not in environments where we could advocate for ourselves.
Mm.
And so that continues. You don't just wake up one day as an adult and then you change. And so
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why women struggle with advocating for themselves. There used to be a saying, there's a commercial that says, anything he can do, I can do better. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
Yeah.
never heard a man, that commercial was a woman. It was
Mm-hmm.
like a little song. Anything he could do, I could do
Yeah.
better. I never heard a man say anything she can do, I can do better, because they know the things that we do better. They respect it and say, that's what you do.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to compete with you with maybe whatever it is that people would say, maybe nurturing, maybe
Mm-hmm.
you name it. Some of the things that women are known to do better. So we have always tried to run that race. I believe in this male-dominated society, and so as we're running the race, it's hard to say I need, because who wants to say I need when I'm trying to beat you in a race, right?
That's true. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so I always have a different slant on things. I'm telling you, I
Yeah.
just have
Yeah.
a
No, no, I had to think about it, but that's true. Yeah.
and so we just have been
You don't
taught
want to
to put
show
your head
weakness
down.
when you're in a race. Yeah.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
you put your head down and you go, 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 go. And
Yeah.
the belief is at some point, it's kind of like when you put your heads in the blocks, at some point, the ribbon will cross my chest before it crosses yours.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we need assistance because the men have been taught to look for the finish line like before they even get in the blocks. They like, I'm gonna win. And we're
Hmm.
we're working on the technique. We're working on how we're doing. And then we say, okay, I got the technique. I have the degrees. I have all these things. I have all of these things that I want in life now. And it's like you can't wait till then to think that
Yeah.
you're gonna be able to be that kind of a competitor. So I think it's
Yeah.
partially stories. I think it's partially just how we show up in the business environment. And I think we don't practice.
Yeah.
You know, I'm old enough to remember when men were the only ones that kind of ask you out for a date, right? Women,
Hmm.
it's a different age now. So women ask.
Hmm.
But, if I'm a guy, I might shoot my shot 10 times and I might,
Hmm.
get 2 out of 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I got to keep going. So they're used to opening up their mouth, asking for what they want.
Hmm.
Maybe there's rejection. Who cares? That's their loss. Let me
Yeah.
keep going. So I
Yeah.
think it's just, again, you got to build that muscle in order to be really good at it. And we just, a lot of times, have not had those opportunities or taken advantage of those opportunities to be able to build that muscle.
And let's, also like to be real, like corporate America was set up so that men could succeed as
Very much
well.
so.
So
Very
we
much so.
are we're running a race in an environment that we're not,
That's right.
accustomed to. It's like going to war, and it's like a very out there example, but going to war in a terrain that you're not used to. Like you're from South Carolina and you're in Afghanistan with sand in your face, like it's just yeah. You
Yeah.
gotta
And
you
then,
gotta
what race are we running? A lot of times
yeah,
men, they come out, they sprint quick. We
yeah.
got to get our pace and check everything out, make sure everything is good. And then we say, I'm ready to be promoted. And a lot of us have heard, I know for me, people would say they got tapped for a position. Like,
Hmm.
where's the tapping happening? Well,
Yeah.
a lot of the tapping is happening in the places that we're not going. So when I was a
Yeah.
sales rep, I remember some of my male counterparts back then, I'd want to say back then, you cannot do it anymore. They would go deep sea fishing with their customers. They would go golfing with their customers. They would do all these things that I was like, I don't really want to do that. That's when the tapping was,
Yeah.
that was sales. But even in corporate settings now, a lot of times the tapping of those conversations are happening in rooms where we just are not there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going out to lunch or going out for a
Mhm.
beer,
Yeah.
all of those things. Yeah,
All those
absolutely.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've quoted, use what you got to get what you want. Okay. How
Yeah.
can listeners, I like that. How can listeners apply this in their own lives?
Yes, I have to give credit. That's not again, I had influence in Chicago.
Yeah.
So there's a song where the woman says, and I need to quote her name, I need to get it, but it is, she says, you better use what you got to get what you want.
Yeah.
And we just 5 minutes ago talked about that we are whole and resourceful and that everything we have is in here. And
Hmm.
so I say that because I truly believe we have everything we need
Yeah.
and we need to use those things to get what we want. But the
Yeah.
first thing you got to do is figure out what you want.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of times we are using the skill sets that we have in spaces where we don't even know if we really want to even be in those spaces.
Yeah.
So the quote should actually be reversed. You got to know what you want and use what you got to get what
Get
you
what
want.
you want. I like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was my guest from that's coming up in the next episode said that she wrote down all the things that she wanted in a piece of paper, like, okay, God, this is what I want. And before it, and the action was, okay, write everything on a piece of paper and then, like ball it up, throw it in the trash, right? So and just trust that God, is going to answer. And then before she did the second step, she said, wait a minute, do I really want all of this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this what I actually really want, and she had to sit down and like, what, and be more methodical, and really think, is this what I want? And so that's a very good, you got to make sure.
You got
Yeah.
to make sure. And then you also have to ask why. A lot of times
Yeah.
people want something because they see someone else have it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's funny you said that energy of that crabs in a
In a barrel.
barrel.
Hmm.
My thing is I can't sleep in your bed. I can't eat your food. I can't spend your money. I can't do any of that. So
Yeah.
I'm happy for you to have it. Each
Yeah.
year I say, can I meet 5 new rich friends?
Yeah.
Every 5 years, I'm like, every year I'm like, can I get 5 new rich friends?
Mhm.
Because they're going to expose me to things that I don't even know exist.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Yeah. When
it,
we
yeah.
bought our first house, we I had a friend who did it. Her and her husband did it, and she's very good at being strategic with her money. She wouldn't necessarily call herself rich, but she's just very savvy, right? And when
Mhm.
it comes to real estate, we went to have lunch with her and her husband like almost every weekend.
Yeah.
And we just sat and we talked and they shared, they give so much wisdom. They were older than my husband and I, but we
Yeah.
learned so much from Sarah and her husband because, they did it and they were willing to share. They were so excited to
Yeah.
have the conversations with us too. They were, they're I think they're like boomers, and so they're like, okay, so this is what we did, and they were just
Right.
imparting knowledge, and I was just like, yes, like, and I learned from people, and so oftentimes, I remember when we bought our house, someone said, oh, you guys did that fast. Like, no, we did not.
Right. They didn't
That took
see everything.
right, that took years of planning, even before we
Right.
met each other. Even before we
Right.
met each other, we put in the work because we knew that we had goals, and I think oftentimes folks don't see that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
alrighty.
So true.
Yeah. So, how can someone move from hesitation to conviction without waiting for the feel ready? Because I suffer from that. I want to make sure I have all my ducks in a row and that I have all the training, have all of this before I actually move. Because my thing is like, I want to be prepared for anything that comes up. But I think in the feeling ready part, right? I kind of lose momentum. But I've seen it the other way where folks like they do something and it looks haphazard and it looks like they're not ready and it looks like they could have, you know what I mean? Like, and they look at me like, oh, okay, so because I saw how you did it, I'm gonna go back and I'm
Mhm.
gonna do it this way. So I don't want to be, that person either, but sometimes I get paralyzed in the
Yeah.
getting ready part.
So two things, I don't know why they just popped in my mind. The first is John Maxwell, and the second is Black Yoga Room. And
Okay.
so I'm not promoting either of those people. But the reason I mentioned John Maxwell is that if you were to Google him now and put in first book, you would actually see a quote that he talks about, and I can't quote him, but he says, if I were to go back and read my first book, I would cringe at the
Mm,
way this book was written. Like, oh,
yeah.
this man, most people know the name. He has written, I have no idea, but I would guesstimate that he's probably written at least 25, maybe 30 books since the first book that he wrote. And he
Yeah.
says, that was my writing and I would cringe. Here's a quote. If you go online, you can see it. There's another woman that I've been following lately. I think it's called the Black Yoga Room. This woman
Hmm.
is amazing. As a yogi, I'm kind of like a fangirl. And so
Yeah.
I was curious with her videos on Instagram. I just started scrolling one day. So I was like, how did she start? How long has she been doing this?
Yeah.
And I went back to some of her earlier videos. They were not bad.
Hmm.
They're okay. They are
Yeah.
nothing what she's putting up today. So
Yeah.
I would say to people, don't necessarily put out garbage. Put some time and effort into it because it's your brand, it's your name.
Yeah.
But each of us has to move. There's an engineer and a chemist in each of us.
Yeah.
Engineers experiment.
Yeah.
Chemists, they pour things in and say, let's see how it works.
Hmm.
But so many of us, we don't want to be a chemist or we won't be a talk show host. We won't be like Joan Rivers, sits up and picks at everything that people do. Oh, that's not right.
Hmm.
That's not right. And what
Hmm.
I find is that if you can't give yourself grace, you can't give others grace.
That's so true.
So
That's
maybe it has to be let me let go of some of this perfectionism so that I
yeah,
stop judging the world in this sort of box that
yeah,
everything be perfect.
absolutely. And yes, that needs to be perfect. I'm a first daughter of an immigrant family,
Mm,
and so there was a lot riding, of course, on because I'm the first one. I'm like the test dummy
mm,
for education, for success, and all of that. And I was always told your brothers are looking at you.
mm-hmm,
you know and so that's a lot of that comes from that. I'm hard on myself, but I tend to be easier on other people.
mm, mm,
You know what I mean? And I know sometimes that's not the case for a lot of folks, but and my husband tells me this all the time. You give others so much grace, but when it comes to you, you're like so hard on yourself. Like you're understanding when people don't do this and don't do that and don't show up in time and even when they don't show up for you, you're so
right.
understanding. But for yourself, it's like, you know, I don't know. It's
Well, there's something
interesting.
to that. I had a
Yeah.
woman tell me one time, I'll never
Yeah.
forget this. I had gone to a conference, and my desire is to really serve Black women. Like if I
Yeah.
could have a clientele, and that would be the only folks that would help
Yeah.
me in my
Yeah.
journey as a coach and a facilitator, it would be that.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe I'm putting that out in the universe. And I shared this at a conference. And I said, but I don't know if they'll pay. I had all these things. And the woman said to me, she said, have you paid for a coach? And I was like, yeah, when I didn't have a
Yeah.
job, I was paying like $350, $400. She said, what makes you think you're better than everybody else? I was like, wow. What's that? So I use that story to say to you that is it that you hold yourself in such a high regard and you're like, I know they would never. So why would I even put them in the space that I'm in? And that's
Mm.
kind of what she was saying to me. Like
Yeah.
you think that you are this,
Yeah.
others are not that. So you don't even hold them to the
The
standard to
same,
think that they
yeah.
would do pay.
I think that's more accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Mhm.
How that's insightful. You just told me about myself in a loving way. But no, it's true. It's like, I put a lot of pressure on myself, but for some reason, like the leeway is, and that could be because we don't expect much. Others, I'm so used to being disappointed. And
Mhm.
I think I don't expect much because I expect to be disappointed. However, for
Mhm.
myself, I need to make sure that maybe it's picking up the slack for the disappointment as well. That
Mm.
has a lot to do with that too. All righty. So let's go back to where we met and at the IDI. Shortly after we met, we were seeing the season marked by major DEI policy shifts, and they're widespread, and not
Right.
just policy shifts like erasure. Let's just keep it real.
Mhm.
What are you observing in leaders and organizations now in terms of ensuring equity? Are you
Mhm.
seeing less equity and inclusion because you work with these folks, or
Yeah.
are organizations finding ways to ensure that diversity stays at the forefront?
I think it depends on the company. I heard a CEO say one time, when George Floyd was murdered,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't have to do anything different because we were always already doing a thing. So we didn't
Yeah.
have to change policy and then change it back. So I think it depends on the individual that a lot of times is leading an organization. It depends on the board and what the board can stomach and what the board cannot stomach. There are companies out here that have no affiliation with the federal government, so they're not tied to any federal funding, but
Mm-hmm.
yet they step back from anything that even looks, smells, and feels like diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
I am a big believer that going back to that little boy that was jumping around in class that couldn't focus on anything, we are a bunch of those little boys
Yeah.
or little girls because we are now in a society where new things are popping up. And so most folks, if you were to poll them, they are not concerned about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Even the ones who wanted it gone bye-bye, they're worried about the other things that you turn on the news and you see today.
Yeah.
As my grandmother used to say, we got bigger fish to fry than that.
Yeah.
And so I think for some organizations, they have not come back to it. But I think we as a people, meaning all people, have to push our organizations back to it
Yeah.
because I don't know that they are going to feel safe enough or really be focused enough because there are so many other distractions out here in the world. I mean, the gas price
Mm-hmm.
today,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's going down tomorrow. It's like eggs when eggs were $10 a dozen. Like
Yeah.
right now, that's what's on people's minds. Can we pay our bills? Are we safe in our roles? Everyone is worried about that. See, at one time, there's a group of people that was worried. Now everybody's one of those little boys and girls jumping around saying, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going
Yeah.
on?" So
Yeah.
I think it is coming back, but we as a people have to demand it and have to find a way to make sure that our employers know that it's important. Whether we change the name, whether we change, I'm not going to get into all of how we do it, but I think
Mm-hmm.
we as a people need to do it.
And that's frustrating for me. Like, okay, first anecdotally, I've read somewhere that, or I've heard someone say that first it happens to Black women and then it trickles down to everybody else. So
Right.
look at what's happening with Black women, in terms of like the job losses,
That's
whatever.
right.
And the unemployment numbers. I read there was a study done in the Wall Street Journal, or covered by the Wall Street Journal that said that compared to 2003, so 8% of Black women from, like, I think they covered 149 or 129 companies.
Mm-hmm.
8% of Black women were promoted to C-suite roles compared to 1% last year.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
then, 1% were promoted to senior vice president roles compared to 4% the year prior.
Mhm.
And then look at the unemployment numbers, et cetera.
Yeah.
So what's happening to us, right? And it seems very targeted because, let's just keep it real. We're, the layoffs and the job losses and the lack of promotion and the lack of
Mhm.
support is happening to Black women first. And if you read what the plans are in terms of like what's happening right now in corporate, it just seems to be targeted towards people of color, especially women of color. And
Yeah.
the numbers don't lie. And
They don't.
so I think it is gaslighting for, companies to say, well, let's see what happens because, like why is this happening? Why is this occurring? And are you are you afraid of the backlash that comes from, pouring into the majority of, the folks that are supporting your business?
Mhm.
Are you concerned about a lawsuit? Is this why this is happening? And if that's the case, let's really talk about it. Be honest with us.
Right.
And I think a lot of companies are not doing that. And I was in DEI recruiting for a very long time, well, for about 5 years or so. And, not just DEI for folks of color, but for women and for veterans. And I get so frustrated at the idea that diversity, equity, and inclusion was created to give someone a leg up, an unfair advantage. When essentially all I did was I went to veterans organizations, I went to HBCUs, I went to women's colleges, and I expanded the pool of candidates so
Mhm.
that those folks who normally don't have the opportunities could actually compete, right,
Mhm.
on the same level as everyone else. And not only that, I recruited interns. A lot of the interns that were hired, not on my watch, but I looked at the landscape, were the sons and the nephews and the
Yeah.
friends of the men that were in the C-suite or in senior roles, which were white and male. And oftentimes the interview is just a formality.
Mhm.
And for me, DEI was created to combat a lot of that.
Yeah.
The unfair advantage, actually. And so when they talk about meritocracy and how, DEI, is, opposes meritocracy or is against meritocracy, are you kidding me? Like, the lack of meritocracy didn't occur because of DEI. In fact, it increased as a result of DEI because now you have to compete with someone who has the same resume, just a different color skin or a different
Mhm.
background. So it frustrates me.
It frustrates me, but I also say we as women, we got to get a different plan. We as Black women, we have to get it. So I got about 10 things I think we need to do. We need to start living below our cost of living.
Yeah.
Below.
Yeah.
So it's funny, hair is a huge thing for us. Think
Yeah.
about the markets we could actually put out of business if we showed up,
Hmm.
face beat, but hair,
Yeah.
not spending all the money.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we have to do is we really have to buckle down. And I don't care if you only have $5, buy a piece of a stock that's $5. Like we have
Absolutely.
got to start
Agreed.
trying to invest. I
Yeah.
also think that
Pay
we
attention now though,
also,
because this market is crazy. So buy
Mhm.
responsibly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I think trade, it was on the news, and I don't know what the percentages look
Mhm.
like now. And I'm sure it's not the easiest thing to pivot to, but there was a segment on one of those news channels during COVID about Black women going into trucking. And
Yeah.
there were all these Black women who were now learning, getting their CDL license and trucking. So I'm not saying that we should all be truckers, but
Yeah.
maybe corporate America is a space for us. But instead of giving somebody 110%, which is what we do, when we show up, for the most part, you're going to get 110%.
Hmm.
Maybe you give them 90%. You take a piece of that and you go and you learn to do something different,
Yeah.
another stream of income. Not just I'm a business owner, but I actually have a trade that
Hmm.
then at some point, if I want to open a business, I can do
You
that.
can do that. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
and I just think we have to think differently. We have to look at other ethnic groups and how they've survived and follow the path that they are doing and stop following the path of the people that don't love us. And when I say that, I don't mean all, but I mean there's a large majority of people that don't look like us that don't care anything about us.
Yeah.
And so my thing is stop trying to follow that.
Hmm.
All and some of us will follow that path and be successful. But for
Yeah.
those of us who are running that race and it doesn't feel right, you can pivot at any time and figure
Yeah.
out what might make a difference for you. Yeah,
Absolutely. For example, like for me, it's like, I had someone tell me like you're trying everything, like see what sticks. I'm like, no, I'm just following my passions.
that's it.
I'm writing, because I've always been passionate about writing. I wrote a children's book. I'm in the process of writing a novel and in the process of writing something else, all
Mhm.
at once. There's a little ADD there, but that's a different
All
story.
right.
I love to cook, and so I've been baking a lot and trying new
Mhm.
recipes, and one of the things for me is going back to like ancestral recipes for medicinal purposes that people that my grandmother and
Mhm.
my grandmother's grandmother knew. And
Ah.
so that's something else that I'm looking into because that is it's so much a part of who I am. It comes naturally. And when I'm in the
Mhm.
kitchen and I'm thinking of things like what did she put in this? Like I can feel my grandmother with me. So I know, that there's guidance there. And so yeah, like things like cooking, like it's and baking, like has always been, oh, like in corporate, it's like you don't have time for that. But
That's right.
now I'm finding so much time to work on those. It's creativity, but it's also very healing for me. And there are a lot of other things like I teach Zumba, so I'm getting into exercise science and
Mm.
there are things that I'm doing like on the side, to kind of help see like what actually sticks, but I'm enjoying it while I'm doing it.
You talk about exercise, so I'm taking a Zen for certification, and there was
Yay!
a group of people that were in there, and one of is one guy in there, and
Yeah,
he said that he is learning to make linen sheets. I'm like, first of all, I ain't
that's
never slept on
awesome.
linen. And so it sparked this whole conversation. And that's why I think part of the challenge that we have, and I'm
Yeah,
gonna go specifically as Black women, is we've got to expand our community.
yeah.
Because as he talked to them about the sheets, they then told him, he told them where he was going to be, the
Hmm.
growing of and one woman has a lavender farm. So she's like, oh, that would be great if we could and now they got a whole conversation. And here's this man probably going to make some sheets and be in Town and Country magazine in
Yeah,
5 years selling
with some
$500
lavender.
sheets, right?
Yeah, with some
So,
lavender in
right. So I
it.
think sometimes we have the idea and then
Yeah,
we're like, and then again, depending on the people you're around, they can't
yeah,
see it
yeah,
and they can't invest in you, right? So
yeah,
I need people that can either see it or they got the money to help me invest. If they don't
yeah,
have either of those, then I
yeah.
probably you're good, right? Maybe to talk about whatever, but I need to find the people that can help and support me in that way.
Absolutely. People don't encourage you and not be like, oh, well, like, what good, like, who's that going to
Yep.
help? And what is that going
Yep.
to do? Like, you want folks to like, so who light up because you're like, you know what? That's something I never heard of before. That's
That's
cool. You
right.
go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, 69% of, those numbers, like the 6 month period where 300,000 Black women were laid off from their federal jobs, 69% of Black women are, breadwinners in their household. So as you were saying, like, that's something that, right now we need to tap into things that we're not normally used to. But
Mm-hmm.
the job loss is here,
Yeah.
instability, identity disruption, all of those things, right? You go to school for one thing and this is what you're going to do. It's
That's right.
easier said than done. What guidance would you offer? And you kind of, did that
I'm
already.
gonna I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell you something. I
Yeah.
told somebody the other day. I said, if you're not introducing beans and rice in your kids' diet at
Mm-hmm.
least once or twice a week, shame on you.
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point you might have to introduce it 4 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want them to say, what's this? You want
Yeah.
them to say, oh, you made beans and rice a different kind of way.
Yeah.
And so the advice that I would give is that, you know, think long term from a positive perspective about
Yeah.
what could be and all the things that you want to do,
Yeah.
but also prepare yourself, prepare your children, prepare your family, because hard days are going to come,
Yeah.
and when they come, we are resilient.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to keep building that muscle of resilience. And there's little things that we can do. I make fun about the beans and rice, but it's little things that we
True.
can do that will help in building resilience for our own children.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I would say just keep building that muscle of resilience, keep celebrating yourself, keep celebrating others, but don't lose focus on whatever that thing is that you want, because it's coming. It may not come in this season. It may take
Yeah.
some work, some 2 3 seasons. But if you lose focus on that, you'll
Mm-hmm.
get upset, you'll get down about what's going on right now today. But
Mm-hmm.
every day
Yeah.
we wake up is a new day to try again.
Yeah, one of the things I've been doing is learning how I've been doing sourdough. So like I
Mm.
have my own starter. I bake almost every week and I make other things with the
Mhm.
sourdough. Like I made
Mhm.
sourdough cinnamon rolls, cinnamon loaves, all of
Mm.
that. And I was like the other day I was making again my starter ready and I told my husband I was like, "You know what? push comes to shove, we will always have some bread.
You always have to, it's again, I know we keep going. A girlfriend of
Yeah.
mine, her mother is suffering from some cognitive dysfunction.
Yeah.
And she said every time she goes to her, they actually have a sign on the refrigerator that says, do not buy bread anymore. And I said, your mother probably coming up knew that if we didn't have anything else, we had bread. And so
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, that's part of being resilient. I
Yeah.
mean, people may laugh at that, but we don't know. It may come a time where you need to make bread to feed you and your husband.
Absolutely. And like
Yeah.
you talk about hair, learn how to do my own hair. And if push comes to shove, I can pop this ponytail off and I can wear my hair curly and natural because it's still in its natural state. And I don't need to get a relaxer, things like that. It's
Yes.
yeah, it helps. All
Yeah.
right. So in your current season of this life that you're in currently, so in the current season of your life, what are you being invited into and what are you releasing right now?
I am really being invited into the term of wellness. And for whatever reason, I've never really liked that term. It just,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just haven't. I think it's the corporate side of me that's real buttoned up,
Mm-hmm.
but I've really been invited into that space. I think I shared with you, I was certified in Bikram and
Mm-hmm.
loved doing that. And then took a couple of classes that were vinyasa. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going through vinyasa training and then yin. I'm doing them all sort of together. They're
Yeah.
separate, but I'm doing them all together. So I think the wellness of the body is calling me and trying to help
Awesome.
others to know that you can grind, grind, grind. That's okay, but you need to
Yeah.
have this yin part of your life if you got all that yang. So
That's
that is
awesome.
there. And the thing that I think I'm sort of moving away from is, and this is slow for me. Um, that mindset that is a scarcity mindset. Because I still have some of that. As a kid, my dad would
Great.
always say, you never want to outlive your money. And so for me, I think about that a lot. And I'm like, okay, I've stepped away from corporate. I'm not grinding. I'm still saving. I'm still doing that, but not to the level that I was at that time. And now my motto is I don't want to outlive my body. Because
Mm.
I see people around me
Yeah,
and they got plenty money, but that body is breaking down.
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That for me is the same, similar. I'm with you. Vinyasa flow is my favorite, and I've started to do more
Mm.
yoga.
Okay.
I happen to live closer to the studio now, and I
Okay.
teach Zumba there as well too. So
Nice. Nice.
every Saturday.
Beautiful.
But
Oh,
yeah, but focusing on my body, and not really on how, like, oh, I want to get to this way because I want to look
no.
this way.
Mm-mm.
But it's because I've been focusing on health and wellness, it's
Mm-hmm.
been happening without me even
Yeah.
trying. So yeah, I'm with you on that. So it's been such a pleasure. We're gonna wrap up.
Yes.
I know,
Thank
thank
you.
you for being so generous with your time. This has been very inspiring, uplifting for me. I learned a lot, just from this 1 hour or so
Same
conversation.
here.
So I really appreciate it. What's next for you? Something that you're willing to share?
Oh gosh. Well, like in the short term future, I always wanted to do a retreat. Like I always just but I never put it out in the universe. I never said anything to
I'll
anyone
come
about it.
do it. I'll come.
And about 2 weeks prior to the hurricane in Jamaica, I went to Jamaica.
Yeah.
Long story, but I went with a girlfriend of mine. We had not been to Jamaica together in like 15 years, and we had another friend there, so we all met. And then the hurricane came. But before the hurricane, I was like, this would be a beautiful place to do a retreat. I
Yeah.
happened to mention it to another woman who is a teacher at the yoga studio where I teach. And she's like, I haven't done a retreat in so many years. She had to close her studio during COVID. And so, long story short, we are doing a retreat in November.
Oh
And
my
so I'm
goodness.
really, really, really excited. And I'm going to blend not just yoga, but also the mindset piece. So we'll do some things that feel more like a retreat that you would go to for your own personal development and not just the yoga space. So
Oh
both
my
of those will be
goodness. Send me
blended
the info.
together.
I'll even come and
Okay.
teach some Zumba.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So I would say that is it. And then the next thing I think I really want to everybody wants to write a book,
Yeah.
but I want to write a book like a Who Moved My Cheese. It does not have to be this
Mm,
big sort of philosophy. I want it to
yeah.
be a fable. I
I
want there
can
to
see
be some
that.
humor.
Yeah.
And I want it to be some lessons in there, probably around mindset or negotiation.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where can folks connect with you when, because I know they're going to want to find out when
Ah,
this is all
so
happening.
there's only one that I've seen, Ranieka Weston, that spells it the way that I do, IEKARANIEKA.
IEKA.
Yep.
Hmm.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, just Ranieka Weston. My Instagram handle is not my name, it's I am R Weston. So
Hmm.
just look for that, or you might even be able to look for my name.
Hmm.
I am trying to grow my YouTube. So that's the imposter syndrome in me, is that
Hmm.
like, does anybody want to hear from me?
Hmm.
So you can go to YouTube, you can find me there. But the best place is probably LinkedIn. Yeah, that's about
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll put a link to all of that below.
Okay.
And send me your YouTube and I'll put it as well. I'll link it.
Okay.
All right. So thank you for
Thank
listening
you.
for being here. And thank you
You.
all of you for listening to Pivot Stories with Leona Hatcher. If anything in today's episode resonated with you or challenged you in any way, please feel free to let us know about it. Comment down below. Be respectful as always. And I'll see you next time on Pivot Stories with Leona Hatcher. Are you ready for the pivot?
I am ready for the pivot. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Of
Thank you. Thank
course, of course, of
you. All
course. It was a
right.
pleasure.
Same here.